Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Wil Brown. So Wil founded the London Movement Group. He's a movement practitioner. And ladies and gay men, I'm really sorry this is audio only, because he is one gorgeous motherfucker. Like, this man can move, you know, this man's got some serious movement abilities. I was just swooning over his YouTube video, and just loads of fun and good, cool, reflective thoughts with it. So Wil, welcome.
Thank you very much, my friend.
And shout out to our friend Daniel, who Daniel, unpronounceable Croatian name, who recommended you to the podcast. So shout out to Daniel out in London too.
Wonderful human being.
So how did you get interested in the body, Wil? What was your route into this?
I mean, it's kind of the old, the classic of I've always been interested in my body. I think for many of us in this, I hate to say industry, but I'll say industry. I grew up as a young child, toddler, pretty much on a building site. My father had bought this wreck of a house, and when I was in the womb, and so my first word was actually hammer, and mess was my second word. So I would bumble around the wreck of a house after my father, and actually my mum sent me some wonderful photos yesterday because they were over all weekend this weekend, so I cooked for them, and yeah, it was really great. So that was kind of the physical nature of DIY, setting up a home for a family, and my dad was trying to do was the first kind of thing in my life. And so my second birthday present was a workbench, a plastic workbench, and I was kind of always very physical in that sense. And I've always been then laboring for my father, or like even as a kid, he'd walk me around the golf course because he loved golf, and I'd be carrying the bag around and just kind of wandering around. But everyone in my family has always been quite sport oriented. And that's always been a big identity of me, myself, and how I saw myself. But like, just my mum was a bit of a weirdo when I was young. She used to always film, so we've got some amazing footage of what's going on when I was a child. And it was basically me, almost like my dad used to call me Dill the dog. I think you might know this one. It's an old cartoon back in the.
I don't know Dill the dog.
Dill the dog is this big silly dog from the Magic Roundabout.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not quite that old. I know you're young and I'm an oldie, but like that I think is like 60. Or something, yeah?
Maybe.
I wasn't born until 79.
Black and white.
So,
yeah. But so that was basically this hyperactive, stupid dog that would run around the place.
Got it.
Bumbling around, and that was kind of my childhood. Was then just doing, trying things, falling over, figuring things out, moving on. And that led me into school with the same kind of intention, and through primary school and secondary school, I was always pretty sport oriented.
Yeah.
And then, that classically sport oriented. I was always into competitive sports, team sports. I'd never played the individual sport, which was interesting. Yeah. I was always in a team. I was always, more or less, I was one of the ones that was towards the leadership role in the team. I think naturally for me, it really came that I really enjoyed sharing with other people, and not so much dominating other people, but helping others and being with others, and the experience of being with others. And that really helped me. Now I'm a teacher. It was something that it became so natural to me. It came so natural to me I think both my grandfather and my granddad were both amazing teachers for me. They spent so much time with me, just whatever sport it was. They spent a lot of time sharing what they had with me with patience. And that really helped me with that. So I think the competitive side also.
So sport, school, and then parkour, gymnastics, like looking at your stuff.
So parkour is actually super recent. So I kind of got really inspired about 5 years ago. So it's a brief background. I did structured team sports until I was 21. So I was playing soccer, American football. My body was a complete, battleground, let's say. And I was doing CrossFit at the time. So everything was very kind of stressful and competitive. And I got a couple of injuries back in 2013, a series of a knee injury, a hip injury, and a neck injury in the same year, and it pretty much put me out of action for that year. And that halted my American football desires to push that. So I then went to study in Germany at the German sports school, and it opened my eyes to things like bouldering. And the bouldering gym, people were doing hand balancing, slacklining. They were doing all kinds of different things. And I started to see more and more videos on social media, because I was quite a late adopter of social media. I think it wasn't until 2014 or 15 that I even began using it. And then I started to really see all these things and be inspired by so many different people. And then I began in a basic gymnastics course back in 2015. And pretty much from there, moved forward. So what I was really inspired by was this idea of, I can do this. I can meet this challenge, no matter what it is, and I can break it down, figure it out, learn it, and nothing seemed as impossible. Then it was kind of a very simple philosophy for life of, okay, this might be really chaotic, let's say, but breaking it down into a series of chunks was then really what's the word? Exploring it, and then experiencing some fear or frustration or all these subjective layers inside of it was so fascinating for me. And I was like, okay, I like this. And I'm going to seek it from bouldering. And there's so much juice there with regards to fear or of technique or of pain, going through certain things of conditioning skin or even going towards an acrobatics or soft acrobatics or learning the handstand. Everything was very deep and vibrant. And I took that then through as a philosophy for my life. It was, okay, I'm very experience oriented. I quite like the idea of, okay, let's dig into this. Let's really see what I can learn from it, and then take it into how I can apply it every day, not just to show off. That makes sense.
Great. So you've come quite a long way in a very short period of time then, in terms of the movement stuff you're doing. I mean, videos I'm seeing of you are fairly hardcore, fairly athletic, jumps and spins and twists and hanging from things and, this kind of thing. So there's this very athletic culture around movement. And this only came I read about 3 years ago, that people started sending me Patel videos saying, hey, you might like this guy. And then Rafe Kelly, who's become a friend we've had on the podcast, he got in touch, and I went to a Fighting Monkey seminar. And then I realized there was a thing called movement, that people were interested just in movement rather than building muscles or performing. Though there does seem to be quite a performative element to it on the social media.
Of course.
Yeah, well, you say of course, but maybe of course for your generation, not of course for me. Like when I started martial arts, for example, there was no video phones.
Of course, yeah.
So for me, there was no performative element to it.
I say of course in the sense of I see social media as a tool. I think as you do of let's say free advertisement or of sharing something, and therefore it becomes a somewhat of a performance, because you're sharing something and you're showing a certain persona, and then you do have to try and get a message across with people's lacking attention spans these days. It's quite difficult. It's something that I'm very fond of writing, and I'm quite open and honest on that platform. And I originally used it as a journal, so I didn't really understand what it was to begin with, and I just started to just put my training videos. I'd write everything that I did in the session down, and I just say what I learned, and I documented it, and I used it as a consistent thing every single day. And it gave me some kind of reflective process, which is something that I'm huge on now. I do a lot of reflection work, written reflections, and it really aids the learning process. But I think going back to your original point of I've come a long way in a short amount of time, I'd say yes, I really have. But I think it's because of resources mainly. Of course, I'm also, in a sense, I'm 25, so I began when I was 21. So in 5 years' time, I finished university and I just dove in. I was sleeping on my friend's floor for 3 years. Various
I love that about the early 20s, man. You can just say, what do I love? And if you're willing to be brave enough not to go down the conventional route, and I applaud you for that, and anyone that does this, you like a student of mine is just sleeping on the door of a Systema dojo at the moment, It's like you can do that at your age, right? You haven't got kids, just like you're at that stage where you've got that freedom, and the resources are there, aren't they? Like you can live cheaply, sleeping on a friend's couch or whatever, doing a bit of odd jobs, and the internet's full of resources. it's just there for the taking for anyone who's interested in any of the things we have on the podcast.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah, and I think that was huge for me. Is the idea of, okay, I'm young, I've got this inspiration to learn and this thirst to learn. And it was kind of like I was reading Ido's blog way back in 2015. It was the kind of first resource I found before his YouTube even. And he was writing how he went to study with Christopher Sommer or the guys in Russia, or just learning from different people. And I thought, well, why would I learn online from a person remotely when I can travel, get an experience, take everything I can myself, and then kind of do the next thing.
Yeah.
And so for me, this whole kind of journey of going from one person, taking everything I could, living how they would essentially, and then moving on was huge. So I spent a long time in Germany doing that, moving around, initially in Cologne, then in Berlin, a bit in Hamburg and Munich. And then I moved to Perth, Australia.
To Perth? Wow, that's quite a
yeah, it was amazing.
Why did you go all the way to Perth? What was
I got this Instagram message, and I was teaching a lot in Germany at the time, with a group in Berlin, and we do these kind of, we did this tour, a summer tour we called it, where we basically taught our view of the movement perspective for a whole day workshop, and we had so many different things involved in it. And then one of the guys in Australia that was working there, Harry, he's a good friend of mine, he was working at a gym, and they needed someone that kind of fitted a role of, they could teach more weightlifting, CrossFit style classes, but also the hand balancing style and the general movement style of work.
Yeah.
And I was kind of a hybrid that fit quite well into that. And the guy was like, look, we're looking for a young guy to come over, and you might fit the job if you're willing to just bum around for a while and see if it fits, then rock and roll. And so I was like, well, I've got nothing else to lose. I'm sleeping on a buddy's floor right now in Berlin. So what's the difference of going to Australia and doing the same thing? So off I went, spent a year in Perth. It was unbelievable. I studied at Modus, if you know Modus movement, became really good friends with Margaret and Mark there, and really dove a bit deeper into Ido stuff. And I basically had a year of nothing other than training. I was very focused. All my resources were completely
great.
Like, I've lived a pretty solitary early 20s. It's been very funny. Like, people are always like,
Let me jump in. Do you think there's a risk? And I did this in Aikido dojos. I literally lived in Aikido. I wasn't dating. I wasn't going to the pub. I wasn't didn't have a normal life. And on the one hand, it was great because I was able to do Aikido 6-8 hours a day or whatever, right? Like, I imagine similar to your training, hardcore training, everything mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all entirely focused on that. But I didn't have long-term girlfriends. I think I didn't develop some normal professional skills, And I kind of, part of me goes, oh, that was the best time of my life. Part of me goes, also kind of weird. Do you think there's risks in that sort of?
Completely agree. I'm the same. I didn't have a girlfriend for 6 years. I was very much, I still don't. I'm very...
Ladies, let me just say that is, Will, I'm sorry to keep flirting with you, but this is really very much a pity. Your midriff is available to see on YouTube, though, so
it is.
We can change that situation, Will, fairly quickly if you have a desire to.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. It was almost like the desire wasn't there for a while. It definitely is now, because I've kind of come full circle in the sense of I tried to be very hard-nosed. Yeah. I think because I saw myself as quite an experience-led person, I was very easily swayed. I'm quite agreeable by nature. But I'm also more of an extrovert than an introvert. So therefore, I was very easily able to say, oh, this person wants to go and do this. Okay, fuck what my plans were. I'm going to do that. Yeah. And that was always a bit of a struggle, because I was always being led towards areas that maybe I wasn't so willing to do straight away. And when I came to and now I'm going to really commit to this, I was like, I'm not going to get swayed off the path by females. I'm going to just be like, okay, that's everything I'm going to do.
Because it is a bit monk-like, isn't it? When there's a beauty in that dedication, right? There's a beauty.
Yeah. I don't want to denote myself as monk-like, but yeah, there was definitely some kind of hyper-focused resource management there, and I would never say that's healthy or that's valuable for I don't want to say holistic, but a wholesome life. Yeah. From how I see life, but for the practice itself and for the exponential curve of let's say growth I was having, then it was super useful and super
good to do for a period, I would say.
100%. And I'm a completely different person now than I was 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 3 years ago. And it really oriented my mindset into how I see moving forward, and always looking to grow, figure things out, and accepting change is a really good thing. And yeah, in some ways I'd say, yes, you're completely right. There's been so many areas where I'm not very good, like dating girls or figuring things out in that sense, or complete alien to me. But within the practice and the physicality of knowing myself, being able to be with myself and being able to reflect on what my desires are and how I see the world and what I'd like to do in the world, I'd say that I had a way better exposure to that. And I'd say that's the maybe I was too far on one end of the scale, but I see many of my generation the complete other end of the scale.
Right.
They're very much into this superficial world of showing without any substance, without really being able to be with themselves, because they're so focused on the next female or male or the next.
Well, there's also that thing of showing this, and we're talking about this with social media. Of in some ways, I think it's not. I see that generation not really just seeking money or sex; it's the appearance of it, even. The validation of being using whatever it is, the yoga, the movement culture, I guess the martial arts, I guess now, or whatever it is, to have that. I'm validated. Like, how does it feel when you're in one of these videos and you've got your top off and you're doing this really cool stuff? I'd love to be able to do it. See Daniel doing it too. I'm like, wow, that's cool,
Yeah.
And his wife's normally taking the piss out of him in the background. And about that.
Yeah.
And but and it must feel nice when you get all the likes and you get all the comments. And now obviously there's a certain sort of way in which you're just using what's there. And I do with social media too, so I'm not criticizing you. And then there's a certain seduction to that.
It's hugely valid, yeah. And I think I completely got into this trap, and that's why I went more on the dedicated line, because I realized, okay, I'm falling into this trap of I'm getting to look good naked, I'm getting notoriety, I'm getting a few likes on Instagram. This is quite a dopamine hit, and it's repetitive, and I can easily do it. I just have to put a video on this free app, and I get these more and more dopamine hits. And I started to realize, I'm doing this every day and I'm spending a lot of time. So then I started to really restrict myself, and I still have app limits. I cancelled my phone contract, and then I just had a handset that had a camera so I could film stuff, but I used only airplane mode. So I could only use Wi-Fi when I was around Wi-Fi. When I was traveling, it was really useful. Kind of like the idea of out of sight, out of mind. When I can't use something, you couldn't use something. And so the addiction of using this for a dopamine hit, therefore, wasn't there.
And do many people in your generation do it? Because I'm seeing this more and more, and it seems to be, I only know most of my friends in their late 30s, early 40s. And it seems to be something people are doing, though. They're either downgrading handsets, they're limiting phone use, like black and white phones, another thing I've seen people do to their phone, like it seems to be a thing people are doing. They realize it's having this disembodying effect, this stressing effect. I've found myself scrolling just last night and going, what am I doing? This is just not making me happy. I'm going to get off this app and read a book, And it's it seems like something. Is that common in your generation or not so much?
From my experience, no. That's why it drove me to be more like that, and to take measures that was very much anti-technological progress, let's say. Because of course we can't just demonize the technological process, the progresses, simply because they make life easier in one sense, but they're not without their downfalls. And this is this kind of way up of, okay, is this a useful thing for me, or is it harming me in a long-term sense? And many of the things that we're looking at is harmful long-term, but super easy in the short term. And it's, for me, I'm always trying to look at my resources and look what I'm doing and say, okay, is it really valuable for me now and in the long term, or no? And then let's take a measure to work on. If it's a habit, break it, and then make it more of a conscious choice. And if it's a conscious choice, then you can really be like, do
I want to do this? Does it help me? Does this actually my aims? Do I want to do this, rather than it being a sort of automated thing? That's, I always say embodiment's all about awareness and choice, right? Like, what are you doing? Do you want to keep doing that? That's the absolutely first thing. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, the awareness of in the initial places is huge. But then, of course, I feel like the awareness is not so powerful these days. And the reason why is because these big corporations are using our awareness against us, if that makes sense. They
algorithms and this sort of thing.
Yeah, they understand, okay, the awareness of something is powerful, but we can still override that with chemicals of dopamine hits and new ways of giving us incentives to keep on using, even when we know we don't want to use it.
Yeah.
So this is really now where I go way more down measures of analog. So I write notes only on paper. I use an analog, like battery-powered alarm clock. I don't have my phone next to my bed. I plug it away.
This is a new trend, though. I'm seeing more and more millennials kind of get into analog, either in a kind of ironic, cool fashion way. You know, it's like, hey, I've got a single app device, and they show you their watch. You know, or in a kind of genuine, like, okay, this is actually helping me. You know, it's the sort of return of the analog is part of, I think, of that kind of millennial vibe in some ways.
Yeah, but I think it kind of, for me at least, it gives me the reminder to slow down. Because it's so easy to do 15 things at once these days.
Yeah.
And sometimes I find myself, for example, I'm eating my dinner, I'm like messaging someone, or I'm doing my online coaching work, and I'm watching a video, and it's like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm not even aware of one simple thing that I'm doing right now. And trying to set chunks of time aside and really go deep into something, rather than doing 5 things for 2 hours.
Do you think we're 4 things for half an hour? Brain so badly here, though, Will. Do you think there's really any chance that this is going to succeed? Do you know? Sometimes I feel like I'm really going against the culture by even trying to do this, and
hugely. But I think that's the way we have to go if you truly believe in something. Because, I mean, I had the same thoughts after I read a lot of Yuval Noah Harari's books, so *Sapiens* and then *Homo Deus*, and especially after *Homo Deus*, I was so down.
Yeah.
And about the future. And I was so heavy-hearted almost, in the sense of I was like, wow, are we really that doomed?
Right.
Is there nothing we can do? But then I thought, well, hang on a second. I'm not living anyone else's life. I'm living my own life. And so having this idea of, okay, if I can take this down of, oh, wow, the world on average isn't going in a direction that I see like I want to be involved in, but I can still be the dictator of my own world.
How do I want to live my own life? And
I think and that's why I love Jordan Peterson is he really has that narrative, I think, of okay, you can't change other people's lives, and you can only really manifest your own life. And I think, comparing yourself to who you were yesterday, not someone else today, is huge. And that's something I try and live my life by.
It's very good in any kind of physical practice, isn't it? To go, I'm in the gym and I can be thinking, look at that guy, he's lifting 200 kilos and I'm only lifting 100 kilos, but shit, actually a month ago I could only lift 80. Yeah. And that's 20% more. That's great. And I'm never going to have his body because he's 6'2" and I'm 5'8". Maybe that's we're different size, and I'm 40 and he's 30. There's different factors involved, right? And
I think even going deeper into that and just saying, well, actually, rather than having that kind of mindset at all, just simply having the idea of, oh, wow, I'm just going to try and be really aware of this and really focus on exactly how it's affecting my body in this moment, and what really the details of weight shifting, or how maybe the grip feeling, or whatever the given task is at hand. There's so many levels of awareness that you can bring in that are way more valuable to you as an individual, rather than even contemplating comparisons, which of course is almost impossible. But
I think there's a play mindset, which I like a lot when I do a lot of movement activities, as a point of comparison. I think, it's sometimes I do like to have goals and, competitive stuff. So I'm not against that. I think it is nice to be able to go into a play mindset. So, I'm just going to mess around. And the parkour kids that I've played with, they seem to have great play mindset of just exploring, and they're like kind of monkeys jumping through the trees. And, I was very impressed. I was with all these sort of early 20s parkour guys I was playing with Rafe in London once in the park. And I thought, these guys are great. They've got a hobby and they're into it, and they're dedicated, but they're also got that looseness around it. It's kind of a nice vibe.
That's something I'm learning a lot right now in my parkour work, and also trying to apply it in everything else I do. And I think it's breaking many things like social conditionings. That's a huge one. What I've realized lately is people, I think, have learned to not have that anymore. And one of the biggest things is social conditionings is, what if someone else thinks like this about me? And I feel in my own practice, what I've been doing a lot more is simply focusing on sensations, or being more aware of what I'm doing. And then just embracing the social conditioning and say, well, you know what? I'm just doing what I'm doing. And I think, when people watch these, my mum loves like X Factor and stuff, and people always love the person that is simply loving exactly what they're doing right now. And they almost look like they're not giving a fuck about what anyone thinks. It's just they're fully in there right now. And I think all of us can see that in someone and accept it. It's when you kind of meet something with a bit of apprehension and a bit of, oh, but what about this person's thinking that and this person's thinking that? And these presuppositions are mirrored almost in the people around the person. And that's when a situation becomes strange or awkward and a bit kind of contrived maybe. And I think what we're referring to there is exactly this. In the parkour community, they're so used to it now. They've practiced it so much of being, they're climbing trees in the park and people are looking at them like they're weirdos, or that evolves into then busy city centers and vaulting over walls or climbing, build a ring or whatever it might be. And you come to embrace it and then accept it. And then it's part of the culture. And then it's not even not even in your awareness, therefore, after a while.
Quick interruption to tell you about my book, Embodiment. Creatively named, hey? Actually, Embodiment Moving Beyond Mindfulness. You can find this online at theembodimentbook.com. That's theembodimentbook.com. So this book is an introduction to the whole field. If you like these interviews, you'll probably love this book. Funny stuff, poems, personal stories from my life, illustrating what embodiment's all about, and loads for professionals in the field too. Top teaching tips, language tips, that kind of thing. Yeah, real condensation of everything I've learned about embodiment, basically. So you can get pre-orders at Amazon.com, and if you just put in Embodiment Moving Beyond Mindfulness, that's the name of the book, or go to theembodimentbook.com. On there, you'll see quotes from various teachers, a bunch of fun illustrations, and you can also get the first chapter completely free online at theembodimentbook.com. Enjoy, and back to the interview. Right, yeah. I mean, I think had a parkour guy talking on the show, actually, from the States. I'm just trying to remember his name. It slipped my mind now.
Amos Rendell, maybe?
That was it. Yeah, Amos was great, which is from the Rails. We're talking about fear, and we were talking about, this ability to take risks. And I've kind of always done it with social risks. I'll walk up to a beautiful woman I like and just start, making conversation.
Yeah, I did listen to this one, actually. It's a really good one.
Comparison, because he would take physical risks that I can dream of, though. Yeah. Perhaps much less risky than they actually might seem, because it's not actually as dangerous for him as it would be for someone like me trying to jump from one wall to another. Exactly.
And that's where there's so much value in the practice of orienting yourself to fear, because fear can be encompassed in anything. Like you said, like walking up to a really attractive female and talking for the first time, which for me is hugely horrible, or jumping from a wall to a rail or something, which for me is now not so scary. And it's really interesting that for you, it maybe be the other way around, and it's such an individual process.
Next time I'm in London, I'll teach you. Okay.
Yeah. Please. I'm sure it'd be a wonderful wingman.
But no, I'm good at that, particularly I'm married. But so there's these different sort of fears, aren't there? And I'm interested in what transfers. Like how do people do movement culture, movement work in a way which actually transfers more into their life? Because otherwise it's like, if you get good at jumping from one wall to another, I mean, that's cool, but you're probably never going to need that in your life, right?
But I'd counter that and say that jumping from one wall to another is simply a container.
Yeah.
And it's a container of so many factors that you can therefore then parallel into your life. So that's what I meant in my recent video with the physical intelligence video of, okay, you're working towards, let's say you've gone past the general work. So you've gone past the general strength and conditioning, and your body's capable of these feats. So the physicality isn't an issue. And therefore you have this element of, okay, you've got a subjective part of this given task. And then you've got the physical intelligence itself. So organizing the body in space and coordinating it. And then it's simply the subjective of can you turn the monkey mind off enough to let go and do it? And that layer is what you can apply, that I found, into real life. Because let's say this, if I'm looking at this task and I'm going, okay, I'm not sure if I can do it because of this and that, or maybe what if this happens and what if that happens and this, and all of a sudden you realize, well, many of these crazy, scary things like jumping from one thing to another, or a backflip is a great idea, because the safest way to do a backflip is to 100% commit, and the least safe thing to do is not commit.
Right.
And so it's kind of like a parallel of going, okay, the more you commit to something, the better off you're going to be in it. And so that's one element of the subjective that's huge.
Yeah, and I guess I'm still like, okay, what transfers across and what doesn't, because it's like I've definitely seen people that get very good at one thing, and maybe some of those lessons aren't learned, or the skills aren't moving across. So, and that strikes me as the main point, right, of whatever we're doing. So that, again, that's just my obsession over the years.
I think it's quite interesting because it's not necessarily the level of someone's application that's therefore relevant. It's not like you say, okay, all of a sudden you get to do this given jump.
You can do a backflip, therefore you've reached a high enough level. And
exactly. Yeah. And when I first kind of entered into the culture, I was like, okay, I'm going to do a one-arm chin-up and I'll be going to heaven. Like, that's the mecca of I'll be I've made it. And you do it and you get there and you're like, oh, now what?
Yeah, still something.
It's like, oh, okay. And so what I think it is, it's the what, why, how hierarchy, I call it. So you've got what at the bottom of the pyramid. That's the whatever you're doing. Of course, you have to have some interest and there has to be some relevance to you. You then have the why, and the why is this kind of, for me, a black hole. You can ask why as many times as you want, but more often than not, it's the most simple one that's most relevant. For example, it's interesting because if you go why, you kind of get to nothing. Why does anything matter? And it's the whole Alan Watts mentality of, does it really matter? So what I find is the most important thing is how I do something. So how you do something is how you do everything. And so if you meet that given task, let's say we go back to the original idea of jumping from one wall to a rail. If you meet that with a sense of, okay, how am I really doing this? I'm focusing on details of being fully aware of myself in the moment, allowing myself to give myself to this challenge, to trust my past experiences and just let it go, to experience that level of fear, or maybe you fail and you experience a level of frustration. Those fears, frustrations, the subjective layer of things, the experiences, that's what you can then parallel to general life. And that's how I see things moving in general life. So how I meet my practice is like that.
So the what is way it's not that important in some ways, just what you're appealing to, and it has to have enough kind of edges and challenges and things to work with.
Exactly.
Might be climbing, might be martial arts, might be parkour, whatever. The why.
Because who am I to dictate what someone should do?
Sure, people like.
I just say, yeah.
And the how is a good definition of embodiment, the manner with which we do things, and that's the real thing you're practicing, right? That is the transferable thing, the manner that your manner of your being that you're practicing in that moment, doing whatever the thing is.
Exactly. That's what I'd say.
Tell me about the London Movement Group then. What is the London Movement Group exactly?
So that's something that I began literally a year ago next week, which is fascinating. It's amazing. It's something that I wanted. I was sharing work online and I was traveling around and living this kind of more nomadic young 20s life. And I realized, okay, now I need to think about my future and moving forward, what I want to provide to the world in 5-10 years time. And I saw it as a cultural community, somewhere where I could share my work and I could facilitate other people coming over and sharing work and having this family, this group in one place where we could all work moving forward. And obviously I then put a ton of resources into learning for myself, but I kind of see, it sounds a bit bullshit, but I'll explain it hopefully well. I kind of see myself and teachers as a whole as hunters. So we go out into the world. Like if you go into prehistoric times, a hunter would go out, they find some fruits. So it's information and it's vital information for their tribe. They come back to their tribe and they explain, okay, I hiked 10 kilometers this way. I turned right, I turned left, northeast, northwest, wherever it might be. And eventually I stumbled upon these berries. So now he's gone out, he's learned something, he's put in the work, he's come back and he's shared it with his group. And therefore that means that they're now better off. And in a non-vital life survival sense, that's kind of how I see my work now is, okay, I go out, everything I'm practicing, I'm very aware of, I'm trying to be very aware of, I'm taking as much information as I can from it to bring it back to the group and then share it. That's how I put the belief system on myself, because I feel like we all need belief systems to really move forward with a level of dedication and intent. And that's why Ido's so brilliant, actually. On a side note, I see Ido, the biggest thing he does well is create belief systems. And that's what great leaders do. But anyway, side story. So the group is therefore then this place where I can share the work and my love of what I'm doing and with anyone that wants to be part of it. And it's grown into this wonderful space where now the guys have been with me for a year, or some people less, some people obviously, like Dan, for example, he was there the first day and he's been there ever since. He's a wonderful human. He's just dove in wholeheartedly. He wants to explore. We learn together. We do like a lot of partner work
together. You meet in the park. I mean, just give me
twice a week. Yeah. Twice a week we meet. I teach them for 2+ hours every single session. So it's at least 4 hours a week together. Plus many of them do one-to-one with me as well. So we dig a bit deeper and we work on more specific work for them. The group is more like a group orientation. We meet many different things of the practice. We have projects that we work on. So the summer project was more outdoor oriented. Now it's come to winter. We've gone indoors and we've started to look at more like bouldering. We've retaken up the hand balancing idea. And
how do you decide what to do? Because there's so much.
Well, yeah,
I love the movement stuff. I look at Daniel. I think, oh, maybe I should try that. I do a bit of body weight stuff, but I go, I can do a kind of handstand press up against the wall, but I go, okay, if I'm going to learn a freestanding handstand, that's going to take a while. And if I'm going to do that parkour, that's going to take a while. I go, there's so many different skills. I've seen you bouncing tennis balls around, sort of more coordination stuff rather than stuff.
So of course, I've worked really hard the last year on my philosophy. And I think it's incredibly important. We've all kind of got a philosophy of life. You've kind of got a system of values that you live by, whether you're aware of it or not. And so what I tried to do is then I tried to define it very clearly for myself in my teaching. And as I started to create my philosophy, then I was like, okay, now I've got a philosophy. It might not be the be all and end all and the most correct, but it's something that I'm very conscious of and I've consciously made decisions for. And therefore the decisions I make moving forward are now based upon something valid and conscious that I've created. And it's just simply how I see things currently. Of course, it's a dynamic system, so it can change over time. But it's something that in my teaching, I see that, okay, as long as I'm providing work based upon what I've really thought about quite deeply previously, knowing that I'm allowed to change it moving forward, I'm going to always give work that I'm proud of, more or less. So with regards to your question of what do I choose, we simply have projects running, but the philosophy is this. We have the general level. So we have general preparedness and general capacity. And this is looking at whenever we have a session, the first thing we do is 0 pointing. And this is an idea that I got from Tom Wexler, more or less. And it's kind of this idea of the form. You probably do a form with Fighting Monkey. And it's this kind of physical assessment of the body, giving some awareness of the body, this physical meditation, as you would. And it's something that we've created together as the group, and we do it in every single session. And we look at kind of centering the body, looking at the awareness of balancing the body, coming into the space, articulating every single joint of the body, and then we begin the session. So that's the kind of preparedness of the body, let's say. Can I articulate the body, and am I aware of each part of the body? Some people's work is just there. Some people come to me and they're not even aware of how to articulate certain parts of the body. So that's a majority of the work they've got to do. The next level, I'd say, is general capacity. So on a general level, how is your strength and how is your mobility? So can you apply force over a greater range of motion? Because that's what gives you the opportunities to explore moving forward in the dynamic movement practices. So what I see people going wrong is that they dive into these dynamic movement practices like parkour or acrobatics and the flashy, showy things, but they don't have this vast accumulated physicality. So the body just isn't prepared and they don't have the capacity to really fulfill the tasks. So their level of physical intelligence is limited by what options they've got. Let's say, for example, someone that can't do a pull-up and they go climbing. Well, they're going to be hugely limited on what they can and can't do.
Right. Just
so therefore, their work, even if their orientation is, I really want to start doing climbing, they should probably put some more work into their general capacity pulling strength, first of all, or alongside at least, to then give them a good chance to experience and explore really climbing. And it's about resource management and going, okay, well, rather than me going, well, I want to do that, so I'm going to do it now. I'll invest in myself, knowing that that's my orientation, and it's not a tomorrow thing. It's a 5 years, 10 years thing. And that's how I see a long-term practice working.
The investment for some of this stuff is pretty big, though, isn't it? I mean, for a young, strong guy with, kind of time, it's a big investment, a lot of this stuff. I looked at it, a lot of it I just looked at and went, well, that'd be cool, but I ain't got that much time. I'm not willing to, because the payoff's it's not enough for me to make a cool video,
And therefore, that's what I mean with resource management. It's incredibly important for me to have clarity with my students and say, look, I understand you work a full-time job, you've got a crazy life, this, and this, but let's work together and work on resource management. Can you manage your resources well enough to add this stress into your life? Because strength training and capacity work and all this training is taking away resources and adding stress to your life. And each of us have a life where each of us is basically like a leaky bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And the water is our resources. And just simply bad nutrition, bad sleep, stressful family lives or work lives is already taking all these resources away. So if I had a movement practice that's already quite stressful into that, it's only going to take more resources away from your life, which isn't a good thing, I don't think. So therefore, you kind of have to be quite clear with every student and say, look, well, okay, this is where you're at right now. This is your goal. That's your want. But what are your needs? And let's try and match them. And again, that comes back to my idea of, okay, well, as long as I've got a clear philosophy, that's how I see it.
Great. Makes total sense. I feel like for anyone listening to this, this applies to all arts, right? It's like, let's say you do yoga or you do dance. It's like, what are you trying to achieve? What fits in with your life? What resources have you got available? Does it actually make sense to have that goal given the rest of your life and the time and energy you have? Like, I feel like just thinking about it in those terms is a fairly intelligent way to think about it.
Yeah, maybe it's an oversimplification, but I think sometimes, like as JP always says, it's Jordan Peterson, to have a low resolution idea is normally quite useful, because going too analytical and high resolution, sometimes you can't encompass the whole complexity. So just doing some things better than nothing.
And what kind of people are attracted to this kind of stuff? Like in the London Movement Group, is it kind of professional fitness people like Daniel? Is it just people that want to relax and have fun? Like what kind of people are?
It's actually really interesting. We have a huge mix of people, which is obviously super useful for me and I love it. But we have anywhere from like bankers to physios to property managers, and we have a journalist, we have dancers, there's not one avatar, which is so fascinating to me. It applies to literally everyone. We have computer nerds. I'm not really sure what style the guys do. They do something that I don't understand, but
some geek stuff. Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Chandler,
stuff that I don't understand.
Jobs. Got it.
Yeah. So basically for me, it's like, okay, cool. This is great. So we can apply this to everyone and we all meet the work together. And yes, of course, some people are more advanced physically than others because they simply have more resources. Yeah. Dan, for example, Dan's got loads of resources physically because he's a physio and he's really oriented into this direction. But also he's managed his resources to be like that. He also doesn't go on dinner dates with friends every night or
yeah, you imagine like you're not a big drinker, for example, right? Like it's not just going to be a thing for someone that does that.
You know? Exactly. And therefore the investment's there. And some people, therefore, they find many things that they're searching for in the drinking culture, therefore in the group. And that's why it's so vital to have a culture, is that, okay, rather than searching for this social interaction and gratification via drinking and party culture, they then get it from a culture of humans looking to simply better themselves in a physical nature. And that kind of translates there into general life. It's okay, now, for example, we trained in the summer, we were training in a gym in near Victoria Park. So we do a 2-hour class and then all the guys would join us in the park and we go for food in the market and then carry on for 3 or 4 hours in the park. So we'd have a whole day together, not just...
Pretty social, huh? Pretty social.
Yeah. And I really want it to be like this. I don't see it as a client thing. It's, yes, I've got a cap of teacher-student and I put my teacher cap on. But then once that's over, I take the cap off and then before we're all together. And I see myself first and foremost as a student as well. And I'm always learning. And I learn as much from them as they learn from me. And that's so valuable for me. A, because I'm 25, and B, because that's how I think life should be.
How is the age issue? So, like Daniel, for example, is, I guess, late 30s. Like, you must have students who are I imagine some of them twice your age, literally, but many that are 10, 15 years older.
Yes.
And I remember what it was like when I was teaching business. I started my business when I was 27, 28, and I was teaching business people who had sons my age, and sometimes they would kind of not quite respect me, and others were able to. They were able to let go of the age thing. How does that work for you?
Yeah, so super interesting question. It's something that I was thinking about recently because I noticed in the class, like, oh, wow, okay, actually, there's only one in the group that's younger. So it's really interesting. But what I found is that, okay, well, throughout my childhood and my life, I was always surrounded by competitive sports and team environments. So coming full circle to our conversation, I was always in a leadership role within a team of guys that were normally older or bigger or stronger because I was quite small and skinny. Especially with regards to the American football team. But I was always the one that was captain or somewhere around there. So I was always in a leadership role. And I think that stood me in good stead to kind of say, well, you know what? I love to be in that position to take the responsibility to help others and to also lead. And when I came to the group, I was like, look, this is what I really want to do. And age is not even relevant in this because the time I've spent practicing and the hours and hours and hours I've put into that, if we look at just that amount of time, then I'm kind of the oldest in the group.
Right, because you're able to dedicate yourself to it all day long for several years.
Right. And I'd say that
as a full-time job, you're going to overtake a hobbyist quite quickly. Yeah,
of course. But saying that, like I said before, I still see it as super great that I'm one of the youngest because I learned so much from everyone. And there's guys there, like I've got a guy that's a black belt in Aikido. So he's obviously got a huge practice as well. And yeah, there's always stuff like you can learn from. It's great.
Who's that? I might know them.
Sal?
Sal doesn't ring a bell. Where do they do Aikido?
In London. He's half Indian, half British.
Okay.
Sal, he's a wonderful guy. He's one of the group. He's been there for a long time.
I know quite a lot of the London Aikido guys. Okay, cool. So where are you going with this then? Like, what's the next 10 years for you, Will?
Yeah, really good question. Next year, the plan is, so I'm slowly beginning to teach more internationally. So I've kept my teaching very kind of one-to-one based online and then slowly began the group. And how I see the group is now we can start facilitating not just my teaching, but also other great teachers in London moving forward. And I'd really like to start expanding that. And I've just started organizing a few workshops for some close friends of mine. And because I've got this quite large exposure of traveling a lot and meeting some amazing teachers, I know some really great teachers and I would love to bring them into London. So next year I've got a workshop with Tom Wexler. He's amazing. If you know Tom. Yeah. And I'd love to use the group not only as a platform for me to share my work, but also for some other amazing people to share their work and to strengthen everyone that's involved, both in their life to inspire from other people's opinions and ideas and work, but also their own individual practices. And also that, therefore, myself, I'd like to therefore go other places and start sharing my philosophies, my ideas. And I'm really researching a lot of the work myself that I want to start sharing moving forward. But I've always never felt quite ready to do that internationally. So I will start doing that moving forward.
Who's great in this space? So with Rafe Kelly's one I really like, Tom Wexler. Obviously sort of in some ways started the whole sort of movement thing. Yeah,
Ido's what you could probably call the main channel. He's the guy that initiated it, and he's kind of everything kind of runs from there and seeps out. No matter if you like him, hate him, for me, he's been a huge inspiration. I've never actually paid him directly a penny. I've always learned from others and been inspired by his work, but always gone, well, you know what? Rather than me going to him because he's done the work for me, I'd rather figure it out myself. So if you look at my Instagram, the first thing I put is figuring it out. I'm just trying to figure things out. And of course, there's been people then therefore under him that have been learning from him that I've then been to and seen and done things there. So I can never say that he's not been part of the journey, but not individually. My current teacher is Marcello Palozzo. So I've been with him for nearly a year now. He's an amazing parkour guy. He's now one of Ido's main guys. They've just kind of come together because he's a really fascinating young guy. So he's a big leader moving forward in that realm, and he's been huge with me with regards to fear and researching fear and seeing fear as a quality that you can train. There's an amazing book, The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin.
Yeah, great book. Yeah,
lovely book. But the kind of incremental versus entity mindset is a huge thing for me. How I try and see things, and Marcello is very fond of that. Maybe not from the specific book, but with regards to training and working with fear as an incremental mindset rather than an entity mindset. So therefore, I am scared of height. I am not scared of height. Rather, okay, this height scares me when I'm doing this. So let's try and expose myself a bit less than that. The same as you would with strength training or anything else. And gradually move forward, gain more exposure, and then get better.
This is the heart of a lot of the work I do, will be around working with triggers, having an intelligent sort of gradient of challenge that you can kind of work within.
Exactly.
Having it as a black and white.
Exactly.
Really interesting what I came across recently was I'm used to working with fight or flight, and I was doing Russian martial arts recently for a few days, and I was staying in their place doing it. And they also work with sort of giving up. You know, like, so if you're doing kind of push-ups or, you know, whatever the exercise they're doing, if you start feeling sorry for yourself, the teacher will like recognize it and call you on it straight away. And I thought that was really interesting because I'd only ever worked with like getting angry, getting scared, but like sort of, it's like fight, flight, flop, you know, that's like collapse, oh, I can't do it. And you're just not allowed to do it in their class. It's just like, sort that out. You know, it's like get out of that mindset, you know, get out of that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting because that one's often kind of missed out when training these things. Yeah.
It's funny you should say that because a friend of mine is really studying the vestibular system and going really deep into what he calls the third state of the nervous system. So he's an amazing parkour practitioner, and his name's Flynn Disney. He's been looking at kind of fight or flight and the third element, because he found that, okay, in parkour, it's not just fight or flight, because there's this kind of middle ground of, okay, well, what happens when you misjudge and you have this fake confidence, or you have this idea of doing something, but you're afraid and you're not in that fighting zone, but you still do it anyway. And he's experienced quite a few injuries recently of being in that realm and not really understanding what it is. And so he's doing loads of interesting work right now. So interesting you to say that. I'm going to suggest him.
Okay, interesting. Well,
really nice.
Well, we need to wrap up. So I'm on a slightly tight time frame today.
There you go, good man.
Where do people find you? Where do they find your stuff?
So I'm working on the website. It's a work in progress. But London Movement Group has the Instagram. My personal Instagram is WBrown7.
I love that you go for the Instagram first. That's
kind of the only thing I have.
There's a Facebook group as well, right?
I just made it like 2 weeks ago. But
Brown7, there you are. Wil Brown. There we go. Nearly 10,000 followers. You're one follower close to it. And where do the ladies find you? Wil, like, is it Match.com or Tinder, or I want to get you hooked up.
Exactly the same. Instagram.
Instagram. So if you go to your video of you pull up and just leave a little heart underneath, I'm going to do that. And a little.
I'll refer mark.
Here we go. Then that means maybe go for a coffee in London. I'm going to hook you up. I'm married. It's too late for me. Okay. So, Wil, this has been fun. Closing message about the body?
Closing message about the body. Wow. Keep exploring it. Keep treating it like a research project rather than an absolute. You can always move forward with something and keep it moving.
Cheers, man.
Cheers, buddy.
Appreciate you so much.
Today. I appreciate your time too, buddy.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So yeah, please go there. On the embodyfacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. If most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodyfacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment Podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodyfacilitator.com website, There's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you. Until next time, welcome home to the body.